Okay, and go. Okay, so my name's Julia Davis of Yoga Teachers Forum, and I'm here today with the wonderful Kate Codrington. And the context of this little chat that we're having is because Kate's just written a fabulous book, Second Spring. I know that looks backwards, Second Spring. And we have quite a long history with Kate at Yoga Teachers Forum. Way back, I think 3 or 4 years ago, Kate I twisted Kate's arm, and I really did have to twist Kate's arm because her background is not in yoga teaching, and I said I'd like a workshop, and I'd like a workshop on understanding menopause, and I want it to be open to everybody, not to menopausal women. Back in the day, then there was the talk around menopause was all about menopausal women. I said, I want it to be open to everyone who might be interested in the menopause process. That I'd like it to be open to men. I'd like to be open to people who are, well under the age of menopause, and to all people, whatever their gender, with womb or without. And we did a beautiful practice where we walked through each stage of the life cycle. So we started in the kind of the first spring, then and we embodied that, and we did practices around that, what that would feel like. Then we walked through to summer, and we looked at how that experience worked, and then we walked through to the autumn. So the summer would be the fertile years. It would be one way to describe summer. Autumn of the life, which equates to perimenopause and menopause, and then across the winter, and then we walked through to our second spring. And it was a very touching experience. I remember there was hand holding, so there were people who were part of the process who found it really challenging to be in certain parts of that process. And those of you who, maybe some of you have heard of Red School, and a lot of that work is very beautiful, and it involves journaling and drawing pictures and being taken through a meditation process of the cycles. But what I loved about this, and what felt really important about this, is that it was an embodied physical experience. And here at Yoga Teachers Forum, we're working with embodiment professionals. We are people here who work with the body and the breath and relaxation practices. So to learn how to work with that felt brilliant and inspirational. So the first thing I wanted to do was to thank you, Kate, for offering that. It has been a kind of a keystone to the perimenopause and menopause training that Jane Dancy and I run with the Yoga Teachers Forum. The thing that I would like to ask you, first of all, which relates very, very specifically to the book Second Spring, and that's why we've invited you here, because we actually have, not only do we reference you in our training now, but we can actually say to people, we would recommend that you read the book, and we absolutely would recommend that you read the book.
I'm glad you had a little look at it first.
I know.
Before
I
you
had
said
about
that,
3
you were
days.
saying that a while ago. I was thinking, read it first.
I've done my best to try and get an advanced copy, but I have to get it
Trust will
on the
take
day.
you so far, Julia.
And I think you were like, I haven't got a copy yet, Julia. I can't give it to you. But what I love about this book is that you're somebody who that there are so many books out there written by people who were like, menopause was a shocking smack in the face for me. I don't want other people to have that. So I think it's Kate Muir who's just got a book out, which is who's saying that. Meg Matthews' book was about her smack in the face. Davina McCall's documentary was about her smack in the face. There are lots of people who've written about menopause. I think there's a book called About Bloody Time, which is not out yet, by somebody who's looking at experiences that aren't the heteronormative experience. That's also, when they wrote the book, their experience was that as well. There's also a lot of medical professionals who are out there writing books about menopause who have not stepped through to second spring. So they're writing from a place of perimenopause, actually, most of them. So what I'd love to ask you about to start off with is how you experience, or whether you see yourself someone who experienced a conscious menopause, a stepping from the menstruating years through to menopause, or whether you were already on your perimenopause journey before you kind of recognized it.
Thank you, Julia. And I think that's a really juicy question, because it, depending on where we are in our life season, it changes our view of what we're experiencing. So if you're away from perimenopause, then it can look like there's going to be a bad thing happening, because you're so removed, or it's unknown, or you can put whatever flavor you put on the unknown, you're going to project onto it. And I think that comes through in the writing. And similarly, when you're in perimenopause, then you're colored, your view is colored by autumn. So it's colored by sort of an urgent need to let go, for example, an urgent need to know the truth. And because I'm in second spring, which means postmenopausal to people who aren't familiar with this structure, then I have a different perspective. I know it's okay. And I have a bit of perspective on the process. And I think you asked about conscious menopause, and I think it's such a juicy question, because I knew about this stuff. My adventures in menstruality, I suppose, really began when I was in perimenopause already. So I was learning about this stuff, and I understood, I thought I knew. See, that's the thing. I thought I knew. I thought I'd got it, because, I'm a body, I'm terribly embodied, and I've been a therapist for so long, and basically up myself. And the purpose of menopause is to undo us, is to undo that knowing. So even though I knew, intellectually understood the process of undoing and unwrapping an evolution that I was required to be in, I still had to be undone. And a lot of my personal process was about undoing that knowing, what I thought I knew, and just having to sit with what is.
Yeah, I think that's very beautiful. There's a lot of prescription out there, like literal prescription, and prescription in practice. I know that there are people who actually have menopause protocols for physical practice that they propound as well. So there's lots of prescriptions out there, and it's lovely to hear that your prescription is non-prescriptive. Absolutely. Because that's something that we and it's interesting. It's not saying that there aren't support mechanisms out there. It's saying that owned experience matters most.
Yeah.
I know in Red School, Red School, a menstrual educator organisation run by the amazing Shani Hugo Wurlitzer and Alexandra Pope, and they very much talk about the owned experience of menstruality, of having periods. And I think that's what you're talking about. You're talking about the importance that everybody has their own lived experience. One thing I wanted to ask you, I've got lots of questions, but one thing I wanted to ask you is, in this book, there's lots of beautiful practices and ways that we can support ourselves through the menopause and perimenopause years. But I know something that you've talked about is how you are held and have been held by other people throughout this experience. And one of the reasons why I want to ask that is because we're talking to space holders here, and my mission is for people to feel confident as space holders for the menopause community. So I'd like to ask how you have been held and what importance you hold for having a support network as you walk through the gates of menopause.
Oh, you can't do it. You can't do it without support. You can't. It's a terror. If you don't have support, then you're left to the mercy of, I'm waving outside my window, the outside world. So the media storm of fear and negativity is out there.
So how did you create your support network, and what does it look like? Because people don't necessarily know what that looks like.
I knew who I trusted, and I invited them to be in a fuck it club. Essentially, I made it for myself,
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to sit in a red tent. I didn't want to sit in a purple tent. I didn't, I'm picky.
Yeah.
As we all should be, about how we are held.
Yeah. I think it's really telling that you created your own thing around the support that you needed, because that takes confidence and it takes, kind of bravado, really, because a lot of us need to be held, but we're not necessarily in a place to stand up and say, I need this, therefore I'm going to create it.
Yeah, I mean, that was, maybe I'm unusual in that, but the holding can be a listening partnership, which is like co-counseling, essentially, where you come together.
Yeah, so
holding can be with a mate in the pub.
Yeah.
It can be with a trusted family member. It can be with nature. How are we held? What does, and again, it's very non-prescriptive. Firstly, we have to figure out, how do we know when we're held? How does our body register being held? What does that mean? How would we know when we're safe? So that's a whole somatic practice, which I'm sure lots of people here will be familiar with.
Yeah.
And then what are the requirements to call in for that?
Yeah.
And if as space holders, we all need holding as well. We need rings and rings and rings and rings of support. And whether that's...
I don't think that can be said enough, actually, that as space holders, I'm just going to repeat that because I think it's so important. Yeah. As space holders, we need rings and rings and rings of support. In order to hold space for others, we need to be held, because if we're not, that comes across, or we fall apart, especially if we are in a vulnerable stage in our lives. We can't do it alone.
So I can share what I have in my life. I have professional supervision, which I pay for with a coach. I have a listening partnership, which is professional. I have a monthly meeting with another menstrual person, somebody in the same industry. That's monthly. I have, that's two different monthly ones. And then another group of 4 of us that we've been meeting for, get this, 19 years.
Yeah. Woo-hoo.
19 years. So that's a fair amount, I think.
Yeah. And for those of you who are thinking, oh my goodness, I don't even know where to start with that, then don't, it's not to worry. It's not to say, oh my goodness, I need to have 5 different layers of supervision and support. It's just to plant the seed of how supportive it can be to have other people to hold space for us. And if we take it into the context of us as yoga teachers or yoga therapists or movement professionals, I know for me, my safe space has always been the yoga mat. Like, as soon as I step into a yoga space, that's been a safe space for me. So if we think about our colleagues within our community that we feel that we are held by, or why that space feels like a good space, that can be a starting point for finding a held community. You mentioned listening partnerships. I think all of our longer trainings involve listening partnerships. So learning how a listening partnership works, and then working alongside a listening partner. And what that allows for is community, and community is key to support. One way to have a support network is to have a community that you feel held by. I was just reading Matt Haig's book, The Comfort Book, which I think you might love. I love The Comfort Book. And in it, he talks about people who go to therapy, and that a large proportion of people who go to therapy feel that they're misfits, that they don't fit in. So there's a lot of us out there feeling like we don't have community. So that can be a beautiful step to take for us to kind of find a little tribe. And you've talked about individuals, actually. You've talked about kind of a lot of one-to-one support. And if we can find support in that way, that can be a really, really beautiful thing. One of the things I loved in the book, as I said, I've not had very many days, and it's not a small book, so I've had to flick through. There's a few things I love. I love the little memes that you've got there from various places, but also I love that you've got practices in there that people can follow. One of the practices that you've talked about is kind of creating some kind of marking of the menopause. So there was a beautiful series called Rites of Passage that was on TV, and Grayson Perry was the person who created it, and it had lots of rites of passage, and I was waiting for menopause and it never happened. It wasn't there. But if we see menopause as a rite of passage, I would love to know if you had any way that you marked, now that you very clearly feel that you're in second spring, how you marked the transition, if you did, and what ways you think that it could be celebrated.
Oh, goodness me. Well, I danced about my compost heaps. That's what I did, because I'm into compost. That's my spirituality. And part of that was burning. I'm a serial journaler, so from the age of, 16, so I had a lot of journals, which make appalling reading. The sort of the internal wrangles of the soul are not good literature. Put it like that. It's like, what do I do with this stuff? So what I did was I burnt it. I kept a few from like key moments. I burnt it, and then I composted it.
Wow.
That was my menopause. So then it rots down with everything else, with the bits of plants and the tea leaves, and it gets put back, and it goes back into the earth, and then it grows the roses. I'm not very good at vegetables, but it grows the roses.
That just reminded me of
it grows the flowers, then the flowers blossom. There's the nice metaphor. Pretty earthy, fairly niche, I would say.
Yes.
Fairly niche. But
that's okay, because that kind of illustrates your point that each of us do things in our own way. I know if you look at menarche ceremonies, first of all, if you speak to any children about the idea of marking their menarche, they'd probably throw something at you. But there are, I think, I can't remember, it was someone in Australia, his name's Jane Hardwick Collins, was talking about her community and how their community celebrates menarche at Beltane. So it's become something that's part of the community, and because it is part of the community, it's not seen as oh my goodness, I can't believe that I've got to do that. So it's because it's ingrained in the culture, it works beautifully. So it's kind of horses for courses. How does it work? How would you feel about marking that stage in life? Would you like it to be with friends? Would you like it to be held by somebody who's an actual ceremony holder, like Melanie Syrett, I think you've mentioned? She held a menarche ceremony for my daughter, so I hold her in my heart. And I think it's something that is really beautiful to imagine and to have an idea about.
In one of the women I interviewed for the book, she had her ceremony. She was given a mantle. Garments often feature sort of being robed, or headdresses, and that, of course, that's something that you can make together as well, or stitch together, or you can stitch it or stick it or draw it, or and then sort of crossing, probably with menarche as well, the physical crossing of a passage. But there are, in the book, there's Melanie and there's a couple of other people who can support you in finding a way to celebrate.
Yeah. Lovely, thank you. And just to continue with the idea of the rite of passage, because it is a celebration of some, to some extent, a rite of passage, but there's more to a rite of passage than celebration. It's a journey and tends to involve a challenge. So do you think that it's helpful, and how do you think it's helpful to view menopause as a rite of passage?
Oh God, Julia, what a bloody question. Oh my God.
You knew when you said you'd talk to me.
Okay, so what the first thing that comes to my mind is it's traversing perimenopause and menopause is so bloody challenging that the celebration at the end of it is just a bloody relief. An acknowledgement that you survived.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's challenging because it's meant to be challenging, because we are growthful, and growth is usually not fun and a trip down the daisy path.
Yeah, well, I think if you think about things in terms of teenagers, some people have a wonderful teenage years. They're held, they're supported. It's actually very interesting if you talk to people about their teenage years. Those people who say they loved their teenage years, they may have gone to schools that they loved, with a peer group that they felt held by, with a supportive family, without very many symptoms, and enjoying their sexual evolution. So those are all things which will hold you in your teenage years, which is a time of enormous change, and for many is tumultuous and very desperate. And I think the mirror with perimenopause is so clear, because are you held by your community? Do you have a supportive family? Are you part of a tribe that works? And sexuality absolutely comes into it as well. How do you feel in your sexuality? Do you feel comfortable with your own body? Do you feel comfortable with the bodies that you are choosing to be with or not be with? Or is there a loneliness connected to your physicality? So I mean, lockdown, that made that, hating to talk about that, but like, that made that very apparent. If you were on your own and you didn't have any tactile contact and you're in perimenopause, that's a very different experience to if you're surrounded by layers of humanity.
And my hope is that the book Second Spring will bring all this and nudge all this kind of stuff into place, that people will start talking more about it. I'd like to there's a question here I'd like to address about tips to build up inner trust and making decisions when in a phase of being undone. And I can hear that the questioner is right in it, and I want to acknowledge that it's really hard, and really that can be a really excruciating place. And I don't know how you're going to do it. But one of the there's two things. One thing is that there is typically in menopause, and I'm going to speak generally about this question because I don't want to kind of try and sort you out. Typically in menopause, there is a conflict between outer demands and inner reality. So the inner reality is that we long for space to let go, for quiet, for nourishing connection, all those sorts of things, for sort of inner connection. And the outside world wants us to do stuff, work, get the money together to be a particular way. And so there's massive conflict. So perhaps the first thing to look at is how you can create more softness between the two, so that you're not so abraded by the external demands. So that's and you will do that in your own way. So that softness might be, it might be meditation practice. It might be turning off your screens. it might be turning down the volume on people. I love, this is my new thing. It's like when you're sitting there and people are in your face and shouting, or it's the news or whatever, and it's turn them down. Turn down the volume on that toxic stuff. So there's that thing. There's that part of it, trying to find ways of managing those two very different worlds. And the trust, I think, comes from looking at other cycles that you have navigated. So that might come from looking at reconnecting with your menstrual cycle, reconnecting with creative cycles or grief cycles or the circadian rhythm. And just that, and we, you know, this is a daily practice for all of us, I would imagine, that we reconnect with cycles of expansion and contraction, or the breath practices are really good for that.
Thank you. I'm very conscious
One more thing.
One more thing. It's your time. I'm happy to keep you all day.
57. One more thing. And the other thing is there's something about softening into not knowing. So this is my practice at the moment, to let myself lean back into really having no clue. And then everything, and I don't know if you can see, but I've just, I don't know. And that,
I think as
for me,
space
that
holders,
it's just like the ultimate.
And as space holders, I think there's a real power. So we, often in our trainings, we say, you can ask any question. We don't say we have every answer, but you can ask every question, because I think there's a power in asking the question and then seeing whether you've got the answer within yourself. So, once you've asked the question, that opens up the possibilities. But if you haven't asked the question, you haven't been brave enough, and sometimes it is about bravery, to be brave enough to say, I wonder what my perimenopause journey will be, or I wonder how I'm going to deal with this. Then the answers have an opportunity to potentially come. So I think it's beautiful that you say kind of lean back into it. There's a lot in your book
we're
about
always
that.
Like this,
Yeah.
And I don't know how you are listening, but with Zoom, I'm always leaning into my screen, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm at it again. I just need to kind of.
Yeah, and it's I think we start most of our trainings with close your eyes or look away from the screen, breathe, take a moment, and then there are moments when it's kind of choosing to interact, choosing to lean in and see and be seen. That's a lot of us do use computers to interact with others now, so being mindful about how we do that, and if we're holding space for that, how we hold space for that is really important.
Because we're so much closer on Zoom than we would be in a room. Can you imagine if I was 2 feet away from your face?
Yeah.
You'd be like, whoa, Kate, no.
Yeah, and ourselves as well. We don't see ourselves in a real space. We are ourselves rather than having a pictorial image of ourselves. I'm conscious of the time, so we can go
a few minutes over. It's fine.
We can get good. Okay, because I'm going to just bring the book up again. I have read many books about perimenopause and menopause. I was dragged into it really by it wasn't dragged into it. I chose to go to the Red School menopause training at the age of 50 that I wasn't thrown out. I mean, at the age of 40 rather. I was the youngest person there, and I just knew that this was knowledge that mattered. Wherever, and I was very much in the middle of my cycling years when I went, so it's something that I really cared about. But to run the training, I was like, ooh, a perimenopausal woman running perimenopause training with a nearly postmenopausal woman. Why? So that I really read a lot about it, see ourselves as space holders, and have loved the people who've chosen to join us and be part of the investigation and creation of that. But there wasn't this book when we, there was you, so we could kind of like point people to you, but there wasn't this book. And this book is different to anything else. Obviously, I haven't read all of it, but I've got the feeling of it, and I know you, and I know and there was a lot that I was flicking through that felt familiar as well. Like I've practiced the abdominal massage. I've actually practiced with you. The seasonal work I've practiced with you. So there's a lot in here that I've actually had the pleasure. You've run a medicine circle, more than one medicine circle for me. So there's a lot that's in here that was like, oh yes, because I know you, but there are a lot of people who don't know you, don't know these practices. And the difference is, first of all, that you are somebody who has walked through consciously the process yourself, and that is very different to other books that are out there about the menopause experience. The second is that you are an embodiment understander. You're somebody who lives your life through your bodily experience, and that comes through as well. Also, you're somebody who really recognizes the necessity to pace and the difficulty of pacing in life. So the book is paced, and there's space in it, and there's a number of different chapters, and then there's big words, and that matters. Yeah, sorry.
There's 72 chapters.
Yeah. So I know, which seems, oh my goodness, there's 72 chapters. But what that does for the nervous system is it breaks it up. It means that you're not going to be reading big chunks at a time. So I'm quite, I don't know whether I'm visual or not, but I notice what happens when I read something, and it calms my nervous system to see big text, 3 lines of words, because then I can sit and be with those words.
Yeah, there's lots of space.
It's nice. Yeah, it's nice to have practice, and then know, okay, this is a practice that I don't want to be reading. I want to be listening to. Oh, there's a link here. I don't have to read this. I know that Yoga Nidra isn't for me to sit and read. It's for me to have a voice holding me. And then also what's beautiful is that you've got it read so that relaxation practices, Yoga Nidra is a form of relaxation practice. It's also a form of hypnotherapy. The voice matters with Nidra, and I love Kate's voice, but you might not, you might not. So you've got the opportunity to either have Kate walk you through the Nidra, or you could record yourself talking through the Nidra, or you could ask your best friend who you love the voice of.
That's such a sweet idea. I love that.
So I love that that's there, and there is also a lot in there for people who are space holders, because when we hold space with people, they oh, okay, actually I'm a space holder. I feel confident holding people in the perimenopause process. I could be somebody who facilitates a menopause ceremony, because that is in my blood. That is kind of who I am as a person. So we are gonna turn off the video, and then Kate's gonna tell me how much time she's got before she's got to leave, for those of you who've been kind enough to join us in person. But as we kind of come to the close of the recording, I can tell you now. Okay, 2 minutes. As we come to, I'm going to be very quick. As we come to the close of the recording and our live stream, those of you who are interested in working in an embodied way with practices like this, then Jane and I have got our perimenopause training beginning again on the 4th of May. It is a beautiful health space. It's one of our favorite things to do. And Kate is a very strong kind of comrade in arms. She's taken the time and effort, and believe me, this is years and years of experience and trust and holding that's in this book, Second Spring. I always have a huge amount of honoring for somebody who has actually taken the time to write a book, and I can't believe how this book is £15. I mean, the amount of effort and time and energy and community and people and that has gone into this volume. that can be a friend to us over so many years. I know this is going to be dog-eared before I know it. It's like it's looking really pristine now.
Thank you,
no, there you go. I've already turned, there's already things turned down. It's going to be dog-eared, underlined, all of those. You know, for someone to have taken the time, for that person to have been Kate Codrington, is very, very special. It's not all people who create a fuck it club for menopause.
Well, I could do it. I could do it because I had good support, and it wasn't done alone. You know, I called in a lot. I was like, help me do this.
Well, I'm very glad that you called in that support.
And I'm, you know, from my birth family, I'm very independent. Independence is prized, and asking for help and vulnerability was not, you know, that wasn't honoured in any way. But for this book, I just asked, and I asked for help, and I kept on asking for help, and I kept on asking, and amazingly, it came. It was like, it was amazing, like astonishing. So it looks, and I learned that it looks like books with authors. It looks like it's the author's book. This is not the author's book, you know. It's just this massive community project, really.
Yeah,
massive community project.
Absolutely, yeah, and it feels like that. It feels like it's a community voice. It doesn't feel like one voice. And I think sometimes when you're reading something that is about a rite of passage, then it needs to be more than one voice that's heard, and many voices makes for a rich experience. There are a number of people who write for the embodiment community, and they write from a place of community. I know Jessica Lenny's book about mentoring was written as a collaboration of all the people that she asked, and it makes it richer. Uma Dinsmore, Yoni Shakti. I'm wondering whether she's going to rewrite the perimenopause and menopause chapters, having stepped through that gateway herself now. But that, you know, books that have a collaborative voice are very, very beautiful to experience for the reader. So thank you for creating something out of voices that really needed to be heard. And you know, there were so many spaces that didn't speak to us in the world of perimenopause and menopause, and for us misfits, it's nice to have.
Misfits.
I know it's nice to have a world where you know, we feel that there's a place to sit. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to unlive us on Facebook. So goodbye everyone from Facebook. I'm going to stop the recording. And for those of you watching the recording, well, I'll make sure there's a link to the book, and there's the link to our training there for you to be able to access nice and easily. So goodbye to you.